Arabic Grammar Unpacked presents a lesson in simple idafas. The idafa is the way in Arabic that we can make one noun possess another. It is one of the most basic structures of simple Arabic, and this lesson will explore it. We have several goals for this lesson: to define and understand the idafa, which in English language grammar books is often called the construct state; to understand how idafas are used to express possession; to learn proper word order in idafas, and to learn which words in an idafa can be marked as definite and why; to learn to use case markings properly in idafas. This is actually very simple. To learn how to use adjectives with idafas. This can be a little bit tricky because of Arabic's lack of small helping words like a or an or is. To understand how to use idafas with more than two words. This is very common in Arabic. And to learn how to use the preposition li to stitch together an idafa when we want to put an adjective or other word in the middle of the sequence of nouns. The word idafa means addition. The plural is idafat. Addition as in addition and subtraction, or putting an addition onto your house. We are adding two nouns together to allow one to possess another. Idafas are how Arabic makes one noun possess another. Sometimes it can express a different sort of relationship, but we won't explore that in this lesson about simple idafas. The words in an idafa are regarded as one unit in a phrase or sentence, so we can't break it up by inserting other words. They act as one building block. And the rules for idafas are simple, but strange for an English speaker. They work very counterintuitively for an English speaker. So we're going to go through these simple rules and explore how they make one noun possess another, and give a lot of examples that explain how this works strangely from the perspective of an English speaker. We'll begin with a few examples here. Mektab al-Ustadh. Notice that mektab, office, goes first here, and the professor, the owner of that office, goes second. So the word order is backwards from an English speaker's perspective. That's one of the simple things about idafas that can be confusing. Another important detail is that mektab, the first word, is marked as definite because it has only a single dhamma as its case marking, even though there's nothing else marking it as definite. It is definite because it belongs as a non-final word in an idafa, and that's what renders it definite. This is also confusing for an English speaker, especially at first. Al-Ustadh, on the other hand, is definite by virtue of having alif lam, and it's also in the majrur case because you see a single kasra at the end. And this is important because non-first words in an idafa are all in the majrur case. You can see the other examples are doing the same thing. Mektabatul Jamia, the university library, the library of the university. Beit Sadiqi, the house of my friend. Here, Sadiqi has a possessive suffix, so it's definite by virtue of that. So you're saying my friend's house. Shaqqat Fatima. Fatima is a proper name, so it's definite. Shaqqa, by virtue of being a non-final word in an idafa, is also definite. So you're really saying the apartment of Fatima. And if you could get this across to yourself and to internalize it, you won't have a whole lot of problem with using idafas. They work backwards, but they're not particularly difficult. So there's two types of words in an idafa: non-first words and non-final words. This is easier than saying last and first words because many idafas have more than two words. Non-first words, that is, every word except the first word, must all be in the majrur case. The first word will be in the case the rest of its phrase or sentence demands. Remember that case is about the grammatical role or function of a word in its sentence. So whether the idafa is the subject of the sentence, the object of a verb, the object of a preposition, what have you, the idafa as a whole will be marked by that case, and only the first word will. The rest of the idafa will be in the majrur case. You'll see a few examples, and this will all make a lot more sense to you. Non-final words, that is, every word except the last one, always count as definite by virtue of being non-final words in an idafa. Remember that there are four ways to make a noun definite in Arabic: to add alif lam at the beginning, to add a possessive suffix at the end, to be a proper name, and now the fourth one, to be a non-final word in an idafa. And because these words are definite by virtue of being non-final words in an idafa, they cannot be marked as definite with alif lam or with a possessive suffix, nor can they be proper names. Let's take a few examples here, and this will all become a lot clearer very quickly. Mudir al-Qism. Notice that the first word, mudir, the director or the head, is definite, and you can see this because it has a single dhamma as its case marking, even though it has no alif lam and no possessive suffix, and it's not a proper name. It's still definite. Whereas al-Qism is marked as definite because of alif lam, and it's in the majrur case, and you can see that by the kasra at the end. So we can separate these two words into non-first words and non-final words, which is confusing here because there's only two words. We ought to say first and last. But if you think non-first and non-final, this will make a whole lot more sense in the long run. So al-Qism is a non-first word, and thereby it's in the majrur case, and we mark it with a single kasra because it's definite by virtue of having alif lam. Mudir is a non-final word. It cannot be marked as definite because it already is definite by virtue of being a non-final word in an idafa. We mark it with a single case marking here, dhamma, by default, because it is definite even though it doesn't look like it is. Take another example. Baytur rajli. Bayt, house, is definite because it is a non-final word in an idafa, and ar-rajul is a non-first word in an idafa, and therefore it's in the majrur case. So you have Bayt ar-rajul, the house of the man, or the man's house. Another example, sahib. Sahib is a word with multiple glosses. Sahib can mean owner, and it can also mean friend. In this case, we mean owner. Sahibul matam, the owner of the restaurant. We can separate them, and we say, oh, sahib is a non-final word, so it is definite by virtue of that. We mark it with a single case marking. Al-matam is a non-first word, so we mark it with a kasra because it is thereby in the majrur case. Ashabul matam, ashab is the plural of sahib, so the same principle applies here. We separate it into non-first and non-final words. Non-first words are in the majrur case, even though we haven't marked it here, we know it is. And non-final words are definite even though they cannot be marked as definite. So go back up and translate. If you want to take out your worksheet and you want to follow along with this and pause here and translate, do that. Pause now. Good. Let's translate these. Mudir al-Qism, director, the department. We mean the director of the department, or the head of the department, or the department chair here. This could mean any number of things. But the point is, the director is owned by the department as far as Arabic grammar is concerned. Look at the next example. Baytur rajli. Bayt is house, ar-rajul is man, so the house of the man, or the man's house in better English. If you look at it as the house of the man, it's easier to read from Arabic, but typically in English we would say the man's house. Notice that Arabic puts the words in reverse order. Object possessed, then its possessor, instead of the other way around. Third example, owner, the restaurant, or the owner of the restaurant, or the restaurant's owner. Same thing applies for the last one, only this time owner is plural, so we have the owners of the restaurant. Again, with these very simple examples, it isn't terribly difficult to see what's going on. The real tricky part is that the words go in backwards order that they normally would as you think in English. So if we move on, we say there's two types of words. The nouns in an idafa do not have to agree with each other. They can be different genders or numbers. Agreement is for nouns and adjectives, or nouns and verbs. When we have nouns and nouns together, they don't have to agree in gender or number. We put them in this idafa relationship, and that's how we express the relationship they have with each other. We can translate an idafa into English using the apostrophe instead of the of the, but we have to be careful when we do this because the word order in Arabic is opposite from the word order in English. And we've pointed this out with the previous examples, but we can try again. Here's the same examples, If you want to take out the worksheet and now use the apostrophe to translate them, you can see the department's head. Notice that head is first and department is second in Arabic, whereas in English they're the other way around. The house of the man, or the man's house. Again, the word order is backwards from our perspective. The owner of the restaurant, or the restaurant's owner. And then here we have the owners of the restaurant, or the restaurant's owners. This isn't particularly difficult, but again, it's counterintuitive because we use the reverse word order and because the non-final words don't look definite, and this can be confusing, especially when we move into more complicated examples. So pay attention now to it. Let's continue. Taa Marbuta in Idafas. Normally, we don't pronounce Taa Marbuta at the end of a word. It just sounds like a fatha. So talib is student, taliba, female student. Ustadh, male professor, ustadha, female professor. This is fairly easy, and we make adjectives take Taa Marbuta, and we make them rhyme with the nouns that end in Taa Marbuta. But if a non-final word in an idafa, that is any word except the last one, ends in Taa Marbuta, we do pronounce it like a regular ta. So this is an aural cue, a sonic cue, when listening. Think about how the Z sound in my brother's house cues you into the possessive relationship between the two. This is the Arabic equivalent of that Z in my brother's house. Take a listen to them. Speak the words out loud as you go. Take out Worksheet 3. Take a look at these. Ghorfatul julus. Notice the ta in there. Normally, room would be ghorfa, but here it's ghorfat al-julus. And by hearing that ta in between the two words, you know that there's an idafa going on. This is a sonic cue for you. We can separate them. Ghorfat is a non-final word, so it is definite. Al-julus is a non-first word, so it is in the majrur case. Another example. Sahibat al-bayt. Now, if it were just a sahib, you wouldn't hear this if the owner were male. But here the owner's female, so the word ends in ta marbuta, so we say sahibat al-bayt. And you hear the ta, and that's how you know there's an idafa. Sahibat is definite because it's a non-final word. Al-bayt is majrur because it's a non-first word. Jamiat al-Qahira. You've probably heard examples like this from al-Kitaab, Jamiat New York, and so forth. You hear the ta at the end of Jamiat. Remember, Taa Marbuta really means tied up ta, so here we're going to untie it and hear it because it's in a relationship of idafa with the word after it. Jamia is a non-final word, so it is definite even though it doesn't look like it is. Al-Qahira is a non-first word, so it's in the majrur case. Same thing goes with this last example. Shaqqat walidatiha. So shaqqa, apartment. Now we hear it's ta marbuta at the end. Shaqqat walidatiha. And we hear the iha because it's in the majrur case, because walidatiha is the non-first word in an idafa. And notice that it's definite by virtue of its possessive suffix, the ha at the end, her mother. Remember that we can never say al-walidatiha because it would be double definite, and that's just a no-go. Shaqqa is a non-final word, so it looks indefinite but is in fact definite. Walidatiha is in the majrur case, as you can see by the case marking. Remember that case markings go in between their noun and their suffix. So, take a look at the worksheet and translate. Good. Ghurfat al-julus, the room, the act of sitting, or the living room, the sitting room, the room of sitting. Sahibat al-bayt, the owner or the friend, but in this case that doesn't make any sense, the owner of the house or the house's owner. Backwards word order from English. Jamiat al-Qahira, the University of Cairo. Cairo is a proper name. Some proper names in Arabic have alif lam, some don't. There's no rhyme or reason to it. The name of the city is Al-Qahira because it used to be Medinat al-Qahira, the city of the conqueror. Shaqqat walidatiha, we have the apartment of her mother or her mother's apartment. This isn't very difficult, but it's backwards from English, so you have to pay careful attention as you go. The final word in an idafa must be definite. Use alif lam, or a possessive suffix, or a proper name. Later on, not in this lesson, we will see that it is possible but quite uncommon to have the entire idafa be indefinite. For now, assume that the last word will be definite when we use idafas. Later on, when we get into things like the superlative of adjectives, we'll see examples of indefinite idafas. But for now, keep it simple. And keep in mind that all non-final words are already definite, so they cannot have alif lam or a suffix or be a proper name. Again, the rules are simple, but in practice they can be a little bit slippery. So let's continue with examples. So separate non-first from non-final words and translate on your worksheet. Have a pause, if you will, and do this. Now we have Beit Sadiqiha. So house, which looks indefinite, but by now you've probably picked up on the fact that it isn't. Sadiqiha, her friend. Notice that written Arabic doesn't generally put the case markings in. You just have to know what they are, and you'll develop this skill as you go along. So there's no dhamma here on Beit. Beit looks indefinite, but of course it's not. Divide them. Beit is a non-final word, so it's definite. Sadiqiha is a non-first word, so it's in the majrur case. Here's another example. Shaqqat. Here you hear the Taa Marbuta. Shaqqat Maryam. Maryam is a proper name, a girl's name. Shaqqa is apartment. So here we separate them. Shaqqa looks indefinite, but is in fact definite. Maryam is a proper name, so it's definite. It's also in the majrur case. Here's an example. Habib ukhti. Habib, boyfriend, lover. Ukhti, my sister. So here we have the lover of my sister. Habib is a non-final word, so it's definite even though it doesn't look like it is. Ukhti is definite because of its possessive suffix, and in the majrur case, although any noun ending with the possessive suffix e for my doesn't get a case marking. Here's an example, Medinat Amman. So Medina is city, but when we put it with the name of the city, Amman in Jordan, we hear Medinat Amman. We hear the ta in Taa Marbuta. And again, Amman is a proper name, so it's definite, and majrur case because it's a non-first word. Medina is a non-final word, so it's definite even though it doesn't look like it is. So take a moment to translate these, and we'll go back. So the house of her friend or her friend's house. Then we have the apartment of Maryam or Maryam's apartment. The boyfriend of my sister or my sister's boyfriend. And the city of Amman. Usually wouldn't say Amman's city. This is just how Arabic gets across the name of a city. We often use the word city to describe it. This is because the names of many cities also have meaning. Amman does not. So continue on with this and look at more examples. If we look at 3-word idafas, Arabic loves to do this. 3 words, 4 words, 5 words. It's very common in journalism, literature, any kind of formal discourse. So now the same rules are going to apply as for 2-word idafas, and this is why we called them non-first and non-final words. Non-first words are in the majrur case, and non-final words are already definite. So middle words in a 3-word idafa, then, are both non-first and therefore majrur case, and also non-final and therefore definite. Let's take a look at some examples, and this will become immediately clear to you. Once again, take out the worksheet and translate as you go. Here are 3 words. Beitu binti al-Ustadh. So here we have a 3-word idafa. We're going to separate it as follows. Binti and al-Ustadh are non-first words, so they are in the majrur case, and you can see that by their kasras. Beit, on the other hand, is going to be whatever case it would be dictated by the rest of the sentence. In this case, we simply use marfu' case as default to understand what's going on here. Now, if we divide it again, we can separate it with this red line. The final word, al-Ustadh, is marked as definite because of its alif lam. But the non-final words, beit and bint, are both definite, even though they cannot be marked as definite. So there's not a lot of difference here. It's just that the middle word is both non-first, and therefore majrur case, and non-final, and therefore definite, even though it can't be marked as such. Again, not super complicated, but a little bit tricky and worth paying attention to. Try another example. babu mektebi al-mudir. So door, office, director. You can see that the word order is backwards. So bab is a first word, so it can be whatever case it needs to be, but the other two are non-first words and must be in the majrur case, even though the last one isn't marked. In fact, in a phrase or sentence in Arabic, the last word almost never gets a case marking. However, al-mudir is a final word, so it can be marked as definite, but the other two are non-final words and therefore cannot be marked as definite, even though technically they are, and you can see that from their single case markings. Here's another example. Sahibatu Baitil Sadiqi. So sahibat, we hear the Taa Marbuta because it's a non-final word. All right, but it's a first word. It can be whatever case it needs to be, whereas the other two words are non-first words and have to be majrur case. Sadiqi ends with the E suffix, so it doesn't get a case marking at all. While sahibat and bait are both non-final words, and therefore definite, even though they can't be marked as such. Whereas sadiqi, the final word, is marked as definite by its possessive suffix. One final example, Beitu Habibi Ibni Ukhtihi. That's 4 words, so it gets a little tricky, but it isn't really. All we have to do is say Habib, Ibn, and Ukhtihi are non-first words, so they're all in the majrur case. Notice the additional example of the fact that having the ho, his, suffix at the end of the final word has to change to he. This is called a rule of prosody. Arabic cannot tolerate the sound ihu for some reason, so when ihu comes up, we say ihi instead. This is something that takes a bit of getting used to and not the topic of this lesson. So, Beitu Habibi Ibni Ukhtihi. House, boyfriend, son, his sister. So you can see how this is going to pan out when we translate, because we're going to go the opposite way in terms of word order. Ibn, Habib, and Bait, on the other hand, since they are all non-final words, are definite, even though they cannot be marked as such, whereas ukhtihi, the last word, is marked as definite because of its possessive suffix. So now try to translate these, keeping in mind the backwards word order and the fact that the non-final words are secretly definite. Good, let's take a look at the first one. House, girl or daughter, the professor. So we're going to go in backwards order, and we can say either the house of the daughter of the professor, or we can go in backwards order and say the professor's daughter's house. Hear those z sounds? That's the oral sonic cue that tells you there's a relationship of possession. And if we look at an example with Taa Marbuta, we can hear the ta in Arabic that does the same or very similar thing. Let's move to the next example. Door, office, director. So we can go forward and say the door of the office of the director, which certainly gets the point across. Or we can go backwards and use apostrophe S and say the director's office door or office's door. Same thing goes with the third example. Owner, house, my friend. So we can say the owner of the house of my friend, which sounds very awkward in English, or we can go backwards and say my friend's house's owner or my friend's landlord. And then the final example is only tricky because it has 4 words. Other than that, it follows all the same rules. House, boyfriend, son, his sister. So we can say the house of the boyfriend of the son of his sister, or we can say his nephew's boyfriend's house. The son of his sister is his nephew. We don't have a specific word in Arabic for nephew, but we can infer it from the organization of the words in Arabic. So his sister's son's boyfriend's house, again, all those z sounds cueing you into what's going on, or we can substitute in nephew. Again, this isn't terribly complicated, but it's a little bit tricky, so it's wise to pay attention to these simple examples so that more complicated ones don't confuse you. Now let's take a look at idafas with adjectives. These can be tricky because the lack of little helping words like a and an and is mean that subtle changes create big differences in meaning between phrases and sentences, for example. So, if a definite adjective comes after an idafa, then we have a phrase, and the adjective is describing the final noun. But if an indefinite adjective follows the idafa, then we've created a sentence, and the adjective describes the first noun. Remember, nominal sentences move generally from definite to indefinite. So if we put a definite adjective after the idafa, then we stay definite, which means we've made a phrase, whereas if we go from definite to indefinite, we've made a sentence. This rule is a little abstract and tricky, and less worth memorizing than learning through examples. So let's look at some here. Mektabet al-Jamiati al-Kabira. So noun, noun, adjective. Library, university, big. So the question is going to arise for you as a beginning student. Is this the big university or is it the big library? And the grammar will help you understand this. So here we have Mektabet al-Jamia, the library of the university. Now look at that adjective after it. Is it definite, making this a phrase, or is it indefinite, making it a sentence? Here it's a phrase. All three of these words are definite, so this is not a sentence. So let's move on to a new example. Mektabet al-Jamiati kabiratun, and I've helpfully put in the case marking there, which normally wouldn't be there. Again, here we have an idafa, Mektabet al-Jamia. These words are definite, but then kabira is indefinite, so we know that we have a sentence here. Sahib al-Bayt al-Jadid, the owner, the house, new. All three of these words are definite, so we can separate the idafa from the adjective, but we know that this is not a sentence, but rather a phrase. Sahib al-Bayt Jadid, now we go definite, definite, indefinite, and we have a sentence. So try to translate these now that you know which ones are phrases and sentences, and see what you come up with. Good. Let's look at the first one. Mektabet al-Jamiat al-Kabira. This is a definite adjective following an idafa. So typically, and nearly always, it modifies the final word in the idafa. So the library of the big university, not the big library of the university. We'll show you how to do that in a few moments here. So again, if you have a definite adjective following an idafa, typically the adjective modifies the final word in an idafa, and you have a phrase. Sometimes grammatical gender will enable you to get around this, but let's stick with the basics here for now. Take a look at the second example. Mektabet al-Jamiat kabira. So now we go definite, definite, indefinite. We have a sentence. So the library of the university, and remember the barrier between definite and indefinite is where we would put the is, am, or are in English. So here we have the university library. What about it? It's big, or the university library is big. Take a look at the next example. Owner, house, new. So is this the owner of the new house, the new owner of the house, the owner of the house is new? It's not obvious if you're a beginning Arabic student, but if you pay careful attention to this, you can learn to do it very quickly. So we have definite, definite, definite here. Not a sentence, a phrase. So which thing is new here? The house, not the owner. So the owner of the new house, or the new house's owner. But if we look at the last example, now we have definite, definite, indefinite, so we have a sentence, and that adjective is going to apply to the first word in the sentence. So here we have the owner of the house is new, because again, the barrier between definite and indefinite is where we put the is, am, or are of the sentence. Again, the rules are simple, but they're tricky, and a lot of practice will help you get better at it really quickly. Also, native speakers tend to be a little bit sloppy with it here and there, which creates additional problems for you as the beginning student. So we'll stick to very simple examples so you can master these simple rules. So sometimes we want to make a phrase where the adjective modifies the first noun, the professor's new office, but the rules won't let us do this to an idafa because a definite adjective coming after the idafa needs to modify the final word. So we have to break up the idafa to make a phrase with its first word. And when we do this, we use the preposition le, belonging to link the first phrase to the next word in the idafa. And then this makes the phrase technically no longer an idafa. Again, this is something best learned through examples. So let's take a look. 4 words, but you can do it. Al-Maktabatu al-Jadidatu li Madinati Dimashq. All right, so here we have library, new, and then the le adding to Medina. Le is like be, it adds on to the word next to it instead of being a separate word by itself. Li Medinati Dimashq, and then Dimashq is Damascus. So the last two words of the sentence are pretty easy to see, of the city of Damascus, and that makes the rest of it easy to translate. But let's look at these examples first. Al-Maktabat al-Jadida lil-Jamia. All right, now this is a little tricky. Here we have the library, the new, which you know means the new library. And now you have the le, and what it's done is it's swallowed up the alif in the alif lam on al-Jamia. And this is very common in Arabic. So we say lil-Jamia, of the university. And then this becomes very easy to translate. Again, it's best learned through example. Take a look at another one. Al-Bayt as-Saghir li-walidiha. So here's the li on the beginning of walidiha, her father. So this is the last word in this sentence is of her father. So we have the house, the small, of her father, which again is pretty easy from an English speaker's perspective. It just takes a little bit of practice to recognize that li attached to a word that you already know. Here we have shaqatu walidiha as-saghira. So here is an example of how we can get around the rules, because as-saghira is feminine and walidiha is masculine. Her father, the father is the thing that we're talking about here, is masculine. So as-saghira can't possibly refer to him, and therefore it can only refer to the other feminine noun in the sentence. So this is how native speakers often get away with it. So try to translate these. If you pay attention to the li, it shouldn't be too difficult, except for the last one, which is a bit tricky. Good. If we look at the first example, we see the library, the new, which you already know means the new library, and then of the city of Damascus. And that's how this is going to translate. Damascus, as we wouldn't say city in English, new library. And we have the S apostrophe because Damascus ends with an S. Some people would put another S after it. You don't really have to. Al-Maktaba al-Jadida lil-Jamia. And this ought to be pretty easy for you. The library, the new, and then of the university. The li absorbs the alif in the alif lam, or the university's new library. So the z here is doing what the li is doing in Arabic by showing the relations of possessions between them. So al-Bayt as-Saghir li-walidiha. So the house, the small, you know that means the small house, of her father, or her father's small house. Again, if you're paying attention, this really isn't all that difficult, because there's only a certain number of things it could be. And then here we have an example without li. Shaqqat walidiha as-saghira. If we want to be more grammatical, we could say ash-shaqqa as-saghira li walidiha. But because walid is masculine and shaqqa is feminine, this is easy to get around, her father's small apartment. So native speakers will often do this, especially if the words in the idafa are of different genders. They'll often do this, however, when the words are of the same gender, because it's a little bit of sloppy native speech going on, and you just need to figure out which word the adjective applies to. That can be a bit tricky for a beginning student. So take a look at some other examples. Beit ukhtiha as-saghira tayyib. Okay, so now we've got two adjectives, and one is definite, and the other is indefinite. So this looks confusing, but isn't particularly. Beitu ukhtiha, so the house of her sister, or her sister's house. But now we have these two adjectives, as-saghira. So what is feminine here? The sister, so it's got to be her little sister. Whereas tayyib is indefinite, so we've gone definite, 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 indefinite. So we know we have a sentence. So we would put an is, am, or are in between as-saghira and tayyib in order to render it into English. Same thing happens over here. Sahib shaqqatihi, here's the ihu turning into ihi again, al-jadida tayyib. So here we have a definite adjective following the idafa. It needs to refer to the feminine noun because it's a feminine adjective. So it's the apartment that's new here, not him or the owner. And then in between the words that are definite, 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 indefinite, we need to put the is, am, or are. So this is a sentence here. Once again, here's 5 words, but don't worry, because it's not that difficult. Al-Bayt al-Jadid li bint al-Ustadh Tayyib. So definite, 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 indefinite. This is a sentence. We put the is in between the 4th and 5th words. And here we have a noun adjective phrase, al-Bayt al-Jadid, and then the preposition li, and then an idafa, bint al-Ustadh, the daughter of the professor, and then good at the end. So Arabic lacks these little helping words, but we can infer where they go on the basis of word order, definiteness, and indefiniteness, and sometimes gender agreement as well. Final example, Bayt asdiqa'ina al-Jadid Tayyib. So this looks like it breaks the word order rules because you have Bayt asdiqa'ina al-Jadid. What's new here, the friends or the house? Well, you know that it has to be the house because asdiqa is human plural, so we'd have to say judud instead of jadid, use the human plural of the adjective. So here we know it's the house that's new, not the friends, because that's the only thing jadid could refer to, because it's the only masculine singular noun that comes before it. And then we have tayyib, indefinite. So all 4 of these examples are sentences. See if you can translate them before we move on. Good. Let's look at the first one. Bayt ukhtiha as-saghira tayyib. So we have the house of her sister, the little. So what's little here? It has to be the sister, not the house, because the sister is feminine and as-saghira is feminine and house is masculine. So it's got to be the house of her little or younger sister, and then we have the barrier and we put the is here, is good. So her little sister's house is good. Take a look at the second example. Sahib shaqqatihi, the owner of his apartment. And then al-Jadida, the only thing that Jadida can refer to here is the apartment because both the sahib and he are masculine. So the owner of his new apartment, what about him? He's tayyib. So his new apartment's owner is good. Then we have al-Bayt al-Jadid li bint al-Ustadh Tayyib. So the new house of the daughter of the professor is good. Or we'd say the professor's daughter's new house is good. Again, it's a little bit confusing at first, but the rules really aren't all that difficult to learn. Bayt asdiqa'ina al-Jadid Tayyib. So al-Jadid, again, can only refer to Bayt here and not al-Asdiqa, because that's human plural. So the house of our friends, the new, so we mean the new house of our friends, or our friend's new house, is good. Again, keep practicing, and you'll do pretty well on these, because fundamentally, while they're a little bit backwards from an English speaker's perspective, the rules themselves are not all that difficult. Continue to practice your vocabulary, and you'll do fine.